Welcome to the Women in Motorsport program. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and with me is Joe Samaniego. As always, a big shout out and thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You too can invest in the Grid Network by clicking on the link in the video description. Or you can always do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing programs. Now, to start this show, we'll start off with the Truck Series and Hailie Deegan. So, late last week, after our show, Hailie Deegan announced her 2024 plans. She will be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and driving the number 15 AM Racing Ford. So she has signed a multi-year agreement for her sponsorship from Airbox, Viva, and Tequila Seltzer. So Joe, after 3 years in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, do you think Hailie Deegan is ready for this next step?
She's as ready as she'll ever be for this next step. One of the big things last year, some folks will remember on this program, myself, Ben, we were talking about how Hailie Deegan had done 2 years in the Truck Series, meaning people were anticipating she's going to do the Xfinity Series at some level next year because she had done one Xfinity Series start, had a top 20 finish. So we were all surprised that she decided to do Truck Series for her third year, a different team because she's still affiliated with Ford. The current Ford team she was with at the time switched over to Toyota. So it's a learning change for her. And considering she had two teammates outperform her this year, I think a lot of people were wondering what's going to happen. Well, this deal came through with a team that's looking at expanding, looking at bringing in sponsorship. Hailie Deegan, she is one of the drivers out there that could bring funding to a team. So this seems to be a move to make sense when it comes to, can she stay in another year in the Truck Series? She could. If she improves, well, that's great. But a lot of people, I think, will be talking about she should have moved up to the Xfinity Series, just like last year when we had this discussion. We've seen several drivers go from the Truck Series, be mediocre, go to Xfinity Series, and then they do better. We've seen some drivers go from the Xfinity Series and do worse or better in the Cup Series. And in fact, just a couple of days ago on Grid Tonight, Kobe, Alden, they were talking about Carson Hocevar going from the Truck Series to the Cup Series full time. So there's really no good indicator, in my opinion, of assured success in the next level. I mean, even Tony Brenniger, this season, at the very beginning, we were talking about how she seemed to be struggling. Now she's putting everything together, and when she made her first Truck Series planned start, really surprised everyone and just seems to have a lot of momentum. This could be a new start for Hailie Deegan, new surrounding, new competitors. We know about the criticism with the Truck Series, the lack of respect. This could be a great opportunity for her, and I think this move made sense, in my opinion.
Right, and Joe, now Hailie will be driving alongside the 25 car which Brett Moffitt drives. So his best finish is fourth in a rain-short Chicago race. And it is his only top 5 finish of the year along with 9 top 10 finishes. There's no confirmation about him yet returning. So do you think he would be a good teammate for Deegan to pair up with in 2024?
I do see him being a good teammate because one of the big things, Brett Moffitt, a lot of experience in the Truck Series, and then coming here to Xfinity Series, gaining that experience, climbing up the ladder. For Hailie Deegan, this is a driver I feel that she could earn the trust with, work together in advancing that team, and then for a team to expand to 2 cars, that's a big step. It's not just simply having a second set of cars on the track and a second set of pit crews, haulers, and all that. A lot of work when it comes to the funding, the sponsorship, the working of the two teams together to try to make each team elevate their performance. It's a big undertaking. I think Brett Moffitt is a good pick to have there. If you decide to go that route, the one mistake I think some people try to look at is having somebody that's very experienced, an older driver that's been around a long time, where you have Brett Moffitt. He's experienced. He has relevant experience in the Truck Series even. So I overall feel this could be a very good combination for AM Racing and for Hailie Deegan to really learn a lot and hopefully have a good rookie season in the Xfinity Series.
Joe, as you said, hopefully she'll have a great rookie season. And it's assumed that Stewart Haas Racing will be providing the technical support to AM Racing. Now, Ford has invested a lot of funds in Deegan's career in NASCAR, but in the past, we have seen Ford let drivers slip away from them, including the most recent Zane Smith. So, how will Ford monitor Deegan's progress and the other Ford teams in the Xfinity and Cup Series?
It's a really interesting dynamic. Hailie Deegan, multi-year deal, so we're assuming at least 2 years, potentially a third year depending on her progress. But you gotta be looking at what's going on in the Cup Series at the same time because let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of seats with Ford backing in the Cup Series. Roush Fenway Racing, RFK with Keselowski, their seats they got two right now. Could they expand to a third team by the end of 2 years, 2026? Potentially. You also have the Wood brothers, one of the oldest teams in NASCAR. They get a lot of support from Ford. And for some reason, Harrison Burton is just average, but somehow has the funding for one more year into 2025. And in 2025, will be interesting to see if Hailie Deegan could be a contender for the Cup Series and where Harrison Burton is with his career. I think Ford has sort of learned after losing Zane Smith, missing out the opportunity of getting Kyle Larson, that they need some star power in motorsports. You look at the series right now, Cole Custer seems to be one of the drivers that is up towards the front. And of course, he came back from the Cup Series. He would love to be in the Cup Series again and top equipment, show his true potential. But overall, when it comes to some of the top rides, Penske, Wood Brothers, which has a technical alliance with Penske, far and few, especially since we've seen the decline of Stuart Haas Racing and the surprise and rise of Michael McDowell, Front Row Motorsports. And that could be another potential opportunity for Hailie Deegan, too, being in Front Row Motorsports in 2 years' time, 2026. So overall, I think Ford, they're going to be monitoring what the other teams are doing, what their drivers doing, and what Hailie Deegan's doing. And of course, who else is going to be in the Xfinity Series with Ford backing? Right now, it's a very limited group. Riley Herbst, his name always seems to come up. He has done pretty good in the Cup Series Super Speedway races. Overall, I think Ford, especially with Hailie Deegan, the last thing they want is to see Hailie Deegan switch over to Toyota or Chevrolet because of backing. I think Ford is really going to put a lot of effort in retaining Hailie Deegan in the Xfinity Series and potentially the Cup Series in 2026 or later.
Now, speaking of opportunities, Joe, Deegan will be racing in Las Vegas this weekend, and we will recap her efforts on next weekend's show. Now, the ARCA Menard Series West will be held at the Las Vegas Bull Ring. However, the national tour for the ARCA Menard Series 2023 season has ended. So, Joe, I'll hand it back over to you for the ARCA Menard Series.
Yeah, the ARCA Menard Series, they were at Toledo this past weekend for the season ending race. Great crowd at Toledo. That community, that city has really welcomed their role as being the season finale host for the ARCA Menard Series. And one of the things we saw, Rita Goulet, she was at Toledo for her sixth ARCA Menard Series start of the season. She had to withdraw from Kansas, but at Toledo, she came home 14th. Unfortunately, mechanical issues plagued her race, so overall, wasn't the best day for her as she drives the number 31 Rise Motorsports Chevrolet after competing in all but two of the ARCA Menards East races. Best finish this year was 11th place at the Nashville Fairgrounds, which is one of the most historic tracks across the country, and of course, a very popular short track among fans. And of course, one of the big things we also had at Toledo, Stephanie Moyer in the fast track racing number 12 Toyota. And we are very excited to welcome Stephanie Moyer to the program. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you guys for having me.
Hello, Stephanie, and welcome once again. I guess we'll get right into it. So, this year you ran three ARCA Menard Series races, and you also made one start for the ARCA Menard Series East. So, how would you describe the 2023 season for you and for fast track racing?
This year for me was pretty simple. It wasn't a big season, unfortunately, but it was, I want to say, a really good season for me. I did pick up a lot more momentum this year, not funny wise, but being on the track wise to the tracks I have been to before besides Toledo. But this year was fairly decent. I hope next year's a little better, but going into this year, I didn't really have high expectations to make it back on the track, but we kind of sort of made it happen. And so I'm happy. Anytime I'm behind the wheel, I'm happy.
That's great to hear. And now, if we take a look at the Toledo Speedway Shore Lunch 200, I'll give just a quick recap on it. So, there were 18 cars that only saw four cautions with three lead changes, and 5 cars on the lead lap. You came home in 10th place at Toledo. So, how did you and your team approach that race weekend, and just how challenging is Toledo?
So Toledo wasn't really supposed to happen for me. It wasn't on my list of tracks, but we kind of came into this with Bristol. The funding was very last minute, so we didn't get to make Bristol. So we figured Toledo might be the next, the last track that we can actually maybe make. So coming into Toledo weekend, it was it was a little different because I've never been to Toledo. So my team was they expected the normal, everything's gonna be great because I'm fairly decent at short tracks, but it was just making sure everything coming into this weekend was gonna go as planned. Not normally when you're racing, everything doesn't go as planned, but coming to Toledo, it was like coming to another short track for me. And um, it's not so much challenging Toledo. It's actually one of the easiest short tracks I've been to, thank God, because I was coming into that and I was a little worried, a little skeptical, being that I'd never been on it. But I did practice on the sim coming into this, so I knew I was prepared for.
Definitely. And you saw a top 10 finish to finish out the 2023 season, which is a great way to transition into the next year's season. So, what do you think 2024 is going to look like for you?
I have a couple options that have kind of presented themselves to me. So if it's not doing ARCA stuff, it's doing more short track stuff. I have opportunities to do the Smart Tour down here in North Carolina. I was offered to do Cars Tour stuff. So I have a lot of options. I'm weighing them out right now, but um, I'm not 100% locked into anything for 2024. So I'm kind of taking it step at a time to see which is the best route for me to do.
Now, one of the challenges is sponsorship, and we see this throughout motorsports at all levels. This last race weekend at Toledo, you had sponsorship from William Petit Consignment and hashtag Ash Vanderlei. Now, of course, Ash Vanderlei, very popular content creator across Formula One, Red Bull, NASCAR, and very big in the motorsports community. How did that deal come together and the opportunity to have support from Ash?
That was a shot in the dark for me. I actually needed I needed 2 sets of tires for Toledo, and so that's really what was keeping us from racing that race. And I figured I'd shoot my shot, and I put a tweet out on Twitter, to kind or X, whatever you wanna call it now, and I just basically said, "I'm shooting my shot. Would anybody wanna come on as a tire sponsor?" And Ash reached out to me, and she was like all for it. And that was the first time she's ever sponsored anyone. So I felt very grateful and humbled to have her on board and kind of give her the experience of what a sponsor should have. Unfortunately, she couldn't be there, but at the same time, she knows how much I appreciate it, and she kind of really made it happen for me. So thank you, Ashley, so, so much for helping. Without tires, it wouldn't have been possible.
Now, Stephanie, you've been racing since the age of 12. How did you get your start in motorsports? And when did it change from a hobby, something out of fun, to now pursuing motorsports on a professional level?
Yeah, so I kind of grown into a racing family. My dad used to race, my uncles used to race way before I was born. That's how my parents met. And when I was growing up, my brother had took over the steering wheel, and so I basically grew up watching him race for a little while. And then I started, one moment I was like, you know what? I kind of want to race. So I was put in a go kart and I ran 2 years in karts, and then I did 8 years in a stock car on asphalt. So it was a long, long way, but I went to school in Ohio, to University of Northwestern Ohio, and I took automotive. And with this school, you have clubs, and we had the race club, and the race club takes students that are interns and put them towards a race team for the ARCA series. So I was an intern back in 2000, I think 18, for Mason Mitchell Motorsports uh, for the ARCA series. So kind of really lit a fire underneath of me, and I gained all my contacts just from being in that club. And it kind of got me to where I am now with the connections of the team owner and just connections in general with everyone in the racing world. So that's basically how it went from a hobby to a professional state for me.
Now, Stephanie, across the ARCA series, we've seen Amber Balkin, Tony Bradinger, and Mandy Chick and you all score top 10 finishes this year. So, how big is it to not only have women racing across the ARCA series, but to have them finishing in the top 10 and putting up competitive performances week after week?
I feel like it's huge only because when people think about women driving, not all of us are in the best equipment. And it's just we try to make a name for ourselves and show that women do belong in this sport. So getting these finishes mean a lot to us, but not just to us, but like younger females coming up the ranks, just knowing that they have an opportunity to get to where we are today, us ARCA girls, and hopefully to move up the ranks. And it's just, I feel like it's big. I feel like it leaves a mark on a lot of businesses and just foundations, and just kind of shows that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and women are making their way up through the sport.
Now, Stephanie, ARCA has a diverse schedule that many consider underrated with the super speedways of Daytona and Talladega, and with short tracks like Toledo and even dirt events. So, does this present a challenge for you when you're considering which races to attend?
Uh, I feel like if you're full time, I don't think so. Think too much of it, only because you have that funding for the whole entire season. Now, with someone that's part time, it kind of makes a big difference because some of these tracks are not live on FS1. So a lot of sponsors want to be on live TV. They want to have this car shown nationally, and there's some races that are on Flow and FS2, and not a lot of people have them. So it makes a little damper on just kind of the sponsors spending their money when they know that they can have TV time. So it all depends. But like I said, I feel like if you're full time, it's not much. I feel like it's a good positive note versus if you're part time, where you have to kind of help these sponsors spend their money wisely.
Now, Stephanie, I've got one last question for you that I really want to ask. As a successful woman in motorsports, what is some advice that you would give to younger girls who are looking to follow in your footsteps?
Oh, I love this question. I get this all the time. So for me, I grew up not having the last name. I grew up not, grown into a really wealthy family, and I know it's hard and I know it's tough, and I went through all of that. And um, I see a lot of women, a lot of young girls that just they have the same background as I do, and it's tough. It is very, very tough. Now, for me, I would have to say, get your connections as much as you can. Talk to so many people, even if you're an introvert like me. I am such an introvert, but it in the long run, it helps you so, so much. Like for me, I wouldn't be here if I didn't get my connections. So if you could get your connections, go to a short track, hook up with someone, and try to get, pick their brain a little bit and see what you could do to get behind the wheel. Or if you're already behind the wheel, how could you extend it and take that next step forward? So just never give up. Just never give up, because some things happen when you don't expect it.
That's great advice, Stephanie. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time and for your great responses as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was nice talking to everyone.
Now, taking a look at the Formula One Academy, we're 1 week away from the F1 Academy season ending weekend at the Circuit of the Americas. Last week, we discussed the top three in the standings left in the championship picture. Now, let's talk about some of the contenders trying to earn a win. So, we have 8 different drivers who have won this year in the inaugural F1 Academy season. So, Joe, besides the top three, which contenders are you looking at?
When it comes to contenders this upcoming race weekend at Circus America, the driver that stands out to most is Nira Marti. Nira Marti, overall, I think a lot of people thought she was going to be one of the contenders for the championship. Was surprised that didn't exactly work out considering her success in the W Series. But overall, Nira Marti, one win this year. She's raced at Circus Americas in the W Series car. Of course, the W Series car was at Tattoos F3. Now they're in Tattoos F4 vehicles. I think she's going to have an upper hand. Another driver that is still surprisingly winless, Abby Pullen. I think a lot of folks at the beginning of this year thought Abby Pullen was going to be one of the contenders to go out there for wins. She has shown potential podiums on the W Series Tour, was one of the favorites to win races each and every week there. And then this year just has not been her year at all, really, including the disqualification at the last race for the F1 Academy. So overall, those are two drivers I'm looking at. Bianca Bustamante, don't count her out. She has 2 wins this year. I think a lot of people underestimate her potential. I think she could go out there, potentially get a win at Circuit of the Americas. But those are three drivers I think have a real shot at winning that race. Now, Emily Duhaus, she has 1 race win. The consistency is just not there. Her last 3 races, she has not scored points. One of the big things I think for her is just that first race, gain the experience on Circus America again, because she was in the W Series, get familiar, and then just try to score points in that second race. And then the third race, hopefully go for the win, because it'll be great for her if she could end the season with a win.
Now, Joe, looking at the race format for the Circuit of the Americas, we have three with a 20-minute reverse grid race two. And we know that Amna Alkobesi has 2 reverse grid wins this year. So, considering Coda and the cars that they are using, could the second race be the wild card race?
I do anticipate this to be the wild card race. When the W Series came here with the Formula 3 cars, it was almost a procession type race that we saw. With the reverse grid, now the cars that were up towards the front, they're going to be a little further towards the back, and you have a shorter time distance to get towards the front. I think really, if you have a solid car, you finish fifth place in the race one, you could be in a good position to get the win in race two. The big thing though, Amna Al-Kabasi, I think overall she's been solid this year. Sixth place in the points, very fast throughout the year. Just has to work on that consistency and trying to get more podiums. She has essentially the two, as you mentioned, the race 2 wins, so the shorter races, and then 2 podiums with third place finishes. If she could come out with a top 5 finish in race one, she could be in great shape for race two. But I think a lot of people would like to see her seal the deal in one of the longer races, so race one or race three, try to get a win, because that's where really it comes down to your qualifying time, how fast you are, and can you put together a good race compared to the benefit of having the fastest cars towards the back and you towards the front.
Now, Joe, this is something that we talked about in our last episode as well, but for the first time, the Formula One Academy's race will be televised. And another first for this race is that it will be accompanied by Formula One. So all of the F1 teams and drivers will be watching. The fans at COTA, we anticipate a big crowd once again. So does this add more pressure on the drivers, especially for those who are winless?
It does, and especially since we know next year all the F1 teams are going to nominate a driver to be in the grid for the second season of the F1 Academy. So I feel this is a really good opportunity, similar to how in a lot of sports you have the scouts coming down to watch and see who they could recognize the talent from. They're going to be doing the same this weekend. They're going to be looking at who is showing some potential talent. They may not have a good race, but they see someone that they feel, hey, they're showing good pace. They're showing smartness when it comes to how they overtake drivers and not putting themselves or the car at risk. That could be a huge benefit for next year when the F1 teams nominate a driver for each team. I think this is going to be one of the best opportunities for the F1 fans to also see this, because it has been unfortunate. This is the first televised weekend we talked about last week. This is the first time it's going to be with Formula One during the Formula One race weekend. This is the opportunity for them to show what they could do, because at the end of the day, if they have a good race out there, they get nominated, that could start everything to F1 Academy, then potentially Formula 3, Formula 2, and up the ladder. Huge day for all the drivers, not just the front runners, but even the back runners too. Chloe Chung, I know she has not had exactly the greatest of season, and she could pull off a podium or just really show her true potential in the car. She could potentially be on the grid for 2024.
I agree with you here, Joe. I think that this is definitely going to add more pressure on the drivers. But for those drivers in the Formula One Academy who do well under pressure, I think it's going to be a huge opportunity because, as you mentioned, they could be nominated for the different teams next year. And I think that, as Stephanie Moyer mentioned in her interview that we showed earlier, um, it's all about the connections that you build in motorsports, not just in, Formula One, but in all types of motorsports. So I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for these Formula One Academy drivers to make connections and get some conversations started with the big teams. And it's very possible that we could see different contracts being offered to these Formula One drivers in the future sometime. But now that's all for our Formula One Academy session, and I'll hand it over to you, Joe, for the closing.
Yeah, that does it for another episode of the Women in Motorsports. Once again, thank you to our Patreon subscribers, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in us, helping us pay the bills, get to the track, and of course, if we have more funds, we'll love to be at more tracks and have more drivers stop by for interviews on here and all of our programs. And of course, buy me a coffee or YouTube super chat. You could even do a thanks if you're watching us and we're not live on the air. Just mention who in the Grid Network team you'd like to get the funds to, and we'll forward it to them. And the easiest way to support us, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs, and follow us on social media. You can see all our social media sites on gridranking.com, plus the latest articles from Matthew and Amanda recovering Formula One, NASCAR, and of course, the Grid Ranking and Endurance Performance Index. For Isha Azim, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.